Well, good afternoon. I've been seeking, almost unconsciously, for some time, some way to speak to the Muslim community or to Muslims, some way to share the Word of God in a constructive and useful manner. And I've been turning this over in my mind for quite some time. And the only interaction really that I've had so far has been with a neighbour, and I have ventured a little bit more deeply into the connections between our people with her, although I haven't gone down the sort of faith route particularly, rather the historical connection. And I reiterated, at that time, I told her the important thing is that we be of one mind. A kingdom divided against itself cannot stand. And so there must be one God, one faith, and one holy book. It's essential that this be resolved. But at the same time, because we are followers of Christ, we know that it must be resolved peacefully, at the expense of our own lives, actually. We can't draw out a sword of steel, but we can certainly draw out the sword of truth, which is more feared, of course. Ultimately, it's more feared by Satan, the one who's pulling the strings behind it all. But it's been revealed to me now that I have a contact. I can't talk to a woman. It won't work with her. Her husband is not of the same race as herself, and she is a skeptical Muslim because she is critical of the mosque. But she's caught in an interesting, or she's placed herself in an interesting situation, marrying a man of a different race, and then she's bringing the children up to be Muslims, to be Muslim. And I feel sorry for them, really, putting on all the posh clothes that they wear. Not always, but they've done it a couple of times. I suppose the way that you would if you were going to church and got confirmed or something like that. The way probably we used to bring up our children, maybe thinking that that was the Christian way. I don't think it is, but that's more what the church has told us, isn't it? So I found there's a man that I knew over a year ago, and he used to attend the church, but only for the coffee. And I got chatting to him. He's about my age, a year younger. And he's a nice fellow, and I enjoyed chatting to him. And he had that disease where your hands tremble quite a lot. You could see that he was suffering from that considerably. And I had to cut up I didn't have to, but I offered to cut up his food for him, and he accepted gratefully because he found it very difficult to coordinate his movements. And he said that he'd tried taking CBD oil, and it hadn't seemed to help. I didn't really know what the remedies were at the time. I know a bit more about it now. And when I saw him, I advised him to eat fat and meat. I don't know whether he'd pay any attention, but He disappeared about a year ago, and I never saw him again. And I'd even been to his house, and I used to look by his house. I would often see him walking in the road, and he just had gone, and I feared the worst. I thought, oh no, he's deteriorated suddenly and all the rest of it. Well, he came into the meeting today in church, and his tremors were almost gone. He was much, much better. And I complimented him on it, and I said, well, you've made a great recovery. How did you manage it? And he said he'd done it with his diet and by taking certain vitamins. And I asked, well, did the doctor recommend that? And he said no. The doctor said nothing about diet and vitamins, but it wasn't working, and he'd been talking to somebody, and they'd recommended that because they knew somebody else who'd healed from Parkinson's by taking these vitamins and following these practices. And so seeing is believing. And I think we're seeing that quite a lot in medical issues now, that people are managing to recover from illnesses that previously they would have been consigned to a life of pharmaceutical suppression and inevitably worsening symptoms. So to me, that he's followed that path also, that signifies that he's a man of an inquisitive mind. Because the only way that I can make the argument to him, and without risking any, how shall we say, browbeating or implied superiority or anything like that, is from a philosophical, sort of ontological stance. And I don't think it would be tremendously difficult, you see, because the problem is that my ideal belief in a peaceful solution, you could call it idealistic belief in a peaceful solution, which I base upon my understanding of the teachings of Christ, who labored the point that we should love our neighbor and even love our enemy. So I suppose, cutting people's heads off with a sword wouldn't fall under the general heading of love. And I think we need a peaceful concordance of understanding. But the Quran allows for the sword, and there is the instruction that the sword be drawn against the enemy, and that the unbeliever ultimately be put to death. And really a holy book that makes that statement and allows that action, I think, as a resident of England, I don't think such a piece of literature should have been allowed to cross the channel. If they want it in France, they can have it, because it's intrinsically seditious and threatening. How could you allow such a piece of writing to be so freely circulated when they'll ban all sorts of other things? But nonetheless, it is calling ultimately for violence. So that's problematic. Now, another interesting aspect, of course, is that the Quran recognizes the Bible as truth. The Quran says the Bible is true. Now, when it says that, it's talking about the Torah. But we're students of the living God. We know that Jesus Christ is woven into the Torah as he is throughout the whole Word of God. So implicitly, they accept what we all know. But there was a forgery. And a forgery, the forged document is always the second of the two, of course. It would be nonsensical to claim that it was the Bible that's a forged document when it's 300 or more years older. So we know where the problem is. We see it. There's no instruction to love your enemy in the Quran. Islamic scholars view it as being tautological. It doesn't meet the standard of perfection that we will find in the Bible from a philosophical and, I don't like to say moral, but just the perfect completion of peace and understanding. It doesn't meet with that at all. And of course, it also binds devotees in endless rites of devotion, like the Pharisees, repeating verses, bowing, repeating, bowing, repeating, bowing. Such a mocking of the one true God, who has no need for your bowing or repeating, because he is God. God bless.